Welcome, dear students. The current session is a continuation of the topic Historical Facts and Events of Old English. I hope and expect this session would further add to your knowledge of the factors, events, and facts that played a role in the emergence of Old English. Well, my dear students, the failure of Old British to influence Old English to any great extent does not mean that the Britons were all killed or driven out. In fact, if you look at the history, there is an evidence that a considerable number of Britons lived among the Anglo-Saxons. However, their language quite possibly had no prestige or no, status attached to it as compared to that of Anglo-Saxons. Well, whether or not the prestige associated with the language of a political elite would have been sufficient in itself to achieve the replacement of Old British with Old English remains an open question, and it is still debatable, and we don't find answers to that as such as definite answers. Anyways, the Old English word will, as you can see here highlighted in red color, which originally meant foreigner, seems usually to have been used to mean Briton, Welshman. But it is also used to mean servant or slave. Now, the meaning servant or slave, as it is associated with it, itself tells about the lower status of the Briton people in the area. Whatever their exact origin, these groups were in any case closely related in language, the all Anglo-Saxon groups. In language and culture, they were so close that eventually they were regarded as one people. For example, the word Angle or Angles came to be applied to all the Germanic settlers in the Britain. And the related adjective Anglisk, which later on changed into English, was similarly applied to all these people and their language, not that of the Angles as such. However, I would say that this political union that we find in the area, it came gradually and slowly. In the early days, there was a kind of a medley of petty kingdoms. There would be small areas, there would be small kingdoms, and there would be separate rulers for each of these. Like the modern counties as you would find in the UK today. So, for instance, Essex, Middlesex, and Sussex were the realms of the East Middle and South Saxon, while Norfolk and Suffolk were the North and South folks of East Angles. Different kings managed different areas. They also managed to establish their sovereignty, within the kingdom. Each area was considered to be independent, had its own ways of collecting taxes, had its own ways of administering the area as well. But these dominations were often very personal and temporary. There would be very frequent changes in, these rulers of these small areas. In very broad terms, we can see a gradual shift southwards of the centers of power and civilization. In the 7th century, my dear students, Northumbria was very powerful and was a great center of learning and knowledge. However, as the times changed in the 8th century, we see that this leadership passed from them to Mercia and then in the 9th century to Wessex. So, what it means? It means during a particular time period, one area would have all the political and social power. During another time, another area would have that kind of power. From time to time and from one century to the other, we would see this shift of power. And finally, it was the kings of Wessex who unified the whole country. In fact, it was from 10th century onwards that the unity of England was quite, durable. And we would notice the king might be Danish, like Knut, or half English, like Edward the Confessor, or Norman French like William the Conqueror. But what matters is that whosoever was the king, whatsoever was the ancestry of the king ruled the whole England.